Good afternoon, everyone. Money and how it affects our relationships with you and with others. We pray, Lord, that you will bless us this afternoon. Please be with those who are still on their way here. Keep them safe. This we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, our speaker for this afternoon, I don't know if you all are aware of Dr. Hunt, our stewardship director for the conference. Okay, his beloved wife, Mrs. Petronella Hunt, is here with us, and she's certified financial specialist, right? I don't know if you've heard of Dave Ramsey. We always hear him on the radio talking about, financial tips, and she is one of certified counselor of Ramsey. So we are so blessed to have her here. When they were here a few months ago and talked with our adults, about money. And so I approached her and asked her if she can do the same for you, for young people. And when she said yes, like, okay, cool. So now I'm going to give the time to Mrs. Hunt. Now, before we do so, Casey and Leilani will help me pass out these papers so that whenever you have any questions for her, just feel free to write it down, and then we will collect it later for our Q&A, for our question and answer. So that for those of you who may be shy to ask your questions, feel free to write it down. You don't need to write your name, just your question, and Mrs. Hunt will be happy to answer it later, okay? So just let us know if you need any pens. We have limited pens. Maybe some of you can share. All right, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. All right. I'm so glad that you came out this afternoon. I was getting a little worried earlier on when I saw 3 people, and I thought, oh, wow, is that topic that boring that no one wants to come out? But I'm glad that you guys all came out. And I thank Leah and the pastor of this church for inviting me to come and, share this important information with you. Now, I will tell you, there is so much to talk about when it comes to money, a lot. And I don't want to bore you with investment and things that you're not even there yet. So we want to talk about some basic stuff. And I know that some of you that will be thinking about later on in life when you're ready to invest, we can have those conversations later on. But what I have found out is a lot of young people are not getting it in school. They're not asking their parents. And so they go to college and they find themselves in trouble and they have no one to ask and they're embarrassed about it. And so at our school, we teach it in high school. We say we want you guys to know some basic stuff at an early age. One of the saddest experiences that I have is when I sit in a counseling session with an adult or even an elderly person and they said, Mrs. Hunt, my mother and father used to do whatever they did with money, but we as children didn't even know what they were doing and no one told us. And so I am always happy at the opportunity of talking to individuals like yourselves. All right. Who am I? Did I grow up in a family where we had a lot of money? No. I was one of those kids I was one of 13 children, the youngest of 13 children. My parents did what they did with money, and us as children had no idea how things were paid. And so when I was in high school, I had an interest in working in accounting. And obviously, when you're in accounting, you're going to deal with money. So that's how I got involved in this very area of money. As Leah said, I'm a certified financial counselor in the Dallas Metroplex. I got involved with the counseling one-to-one by sheer accident. My husband was pastoring a church in the Richardson Church, and we'd been there for a while, and some of you are sitting there and thinking, she sounds like she has an accent. Where could she be from? Does anyone, other than you, does anyone want to guess to see where I'm from based on how I speak? India? India? No, not at all.
South America?
No. No. I'm actually African by birth. I was born in Zimbabwe. And then when I was 18, I moved to England, and then my husband was born in England, so we met while we were in England. But when we got here in 2001, and we wanted to get a house, nobody would give us a mortgage. And I thought, that is weird. We have no debt. He's working, he has a job. Why won't anyone allow us to have a mortgage? And we found out the reason that no one would give us a mortgage was because we didn't have any debt. Now, does that make sense? You don't have debt, and yet, no one gives you money, but if you have debt, you're going to be able to get money. It didn't make sense anyway. So we had to learn the way things happen in America. You had to have a credit score. And as a result of having to do all those things for ourselves, I started learning about how things are done here in America. Dave Ramsey, I know there's a gentleman here who met me at lunch, and he told me he was involved with Dave Ramsey, and he did what Dave Ramsey did, and they're happy. And so as a result of my husband and I being in that position, we decided we needed to learn some of these things here in America. And so we got a car and had a car payment so we could build credit. And then we realized, well, hey, we just got one car payment. No, but you need to have a credit card in order to build your credit even more. And we started doing things thinking that that was the way to live in America. And I will tell you that there's a lot of things out there that tell you how you should be doing it. Some of them are right, and some of them are totally wrong. So what's normal in America? And I have some statistics I want to share with you. And I know Leah mentioned that you guys have that piece of paper. We will cover certain topics. Feel free to write your questions on there at the time when you're thinking of them. And no question is a stupid question, okay? Just write any question that you have, and then we'll have a question and answer session. Here's real life statistics. 7 out of 10 people live paycheck to paycheck. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Of these 10 people, 7 of those people could easily be living paycheck to paycheck. That's scary. That means in their household, if mom or dad did not get a paycheck, just one paycheck, they'd be in trouble financially. 78 million Americans have no savings at all. I'm not talking about some savings, no savings at all, which means if mom or dad lost a job, we had no money, but we've got no savings to even fall back on during that time. That's scary. Oops. I mentioned about the 78% living paycheck to paycheck. Here's what's normal in the American household. Typical household has $16,000 in just credit card debt. Credit card. Now remember, there's other type of debts. You'd have student loans. You would have mortgages. You would have loans, car payments. This is just on credit card. When I used to hear these statistics, I used to think, those are just numbers that somebody put together, until I started doing these financial seminars. And when I do classes, one of the exercises I do in that class is I give every person in my class a piece of paper, and I say, go home, and on this piece of paper, just write down the amount of debt you have. Don't put your name. Don't tell me what kind of debt, and bring it back to class. And we would sit and we would add that up. And do you know, this number was always, that number always existed. In fact, a lot of people were in $35,000 and $40,000 worth of debt total, including credit cards. And yet, those individuals' household income might have only been $45,000. And you're like, wow, where have we messed up? Listen to this. More than half of minimum wage workers say they have to work more than one job to make ends meet. Well, you're probably thinking, well, it's only because they're earning minimum wage. But guess what? In some parts of the country, even a 6-figure amount is not enough. And so we're going to see some of this stuff. The average American with student loan debt carries a balance of $50,800. That is just student loan debt. If you think that number is high, let me let you into some secrets. As part of my financial counseling job, I meet with individuals on a one-to-one basis. One of the exercises they do is make a list of their debts. If somebody comes to me and says, I got $50,000 worth of student loans, that person is not as bad as some of other students there. Some people come with $100,000. I have people, one guy came to me, he was a lawyer, he had $275,000 worth of student loans. Why am I sharing this information with you? Because this is real life. And we want to be able to give you tools that will help you so that you don't end up being part of these statistics. Here's some information regarding student debt. 74% don't know how long they have to pay off their loan. Well, people have gone and they've signed on the paper and said, okay, yeah, I'm going to get this loan from the government, but they don't know how long it's going to take for them to pay. 53% don't know what their monthly payment will be. You have to know that information because here's what's going to happen. When you get a job, you've got to factor into your job 6 months after you graduate that you've got to make those payments back, okay? 59% don't know how much of their income will go towards repayment. They're going to get a job, but they don't know how much of that. And sometimes you're not telling them how much you're paying them. They're telling you how much you need to pay. And so they're going to tell you, you've graduated, it's 6 months after your graduation, here's how much you need to pay. Another statistic, 52% don't know if anyone co-signed their loan. You don't know if somebody co-signed your loan. Did your parents go with you and co-sign? You know, you have to know. And as young people, and I know I put an age range of 14 to 30, and some of you are still in school, but we're sharing this information for you now so that later on you can start thinking of some of this stuff. And those of you that have been through college and have come out of college and you having to deal with student loans, some of these things might have been new, but here I am here to help you. I'm not here to try and make anyone feel guilty, okay? Promise? You'll be friends with me even after the seminar? I want to help you. That's why I gave you those pieces of paper to say, ask the questions, and we'll see how we can help you. So what about the church? You know, one of the alarming things for me was, I used to think that in the church it's different. The Lord has blessed us. How can we end up with so much debt? So I would run financial seminars outside the church, and I would also run them in the church. And guess what? The numbers were no different. In fact, it was more alarming for me because I thought, us as Christians, we should be leading in this area. And I realized we're all caught up in the same mess when it comes to our finances. Have a look over here. Here's some demographics that I have. It says 88% are broke or worse. If you look at your church environment, you will realize there are 70% of people who are completely broke. 16% are bankrupt, no margin. 2% are doing well. 10% are debt-free and say, yeah, I'm debt-free, come and join me. And 2% are worse than bankrupt. And, you know, the way these loan companies have set things up, gone are the days when you thought, if I file for bankruptcy, I will never get myself in a mess again because no one's going to give me a loan. Do you know there are banks, there are organizations that are out there to get the individuals who file for bankruptcy and can't get credit anywhere else? So they come to you and they say, I know you can't get a credit card or you can't get a loan anywhere else. Come to us. We'll give it to you. We know you filed for bankruptcy. But guess what? The interest rate is going to be higher than anywhere else because that's the only place you can actually get it. So, does the Bible say anything about money? Yes, it does. If you forget everything that I say today and you take away 3 things, those are the 3 things that I want you to take away. Take those 3 points. Save money, avoid debt, and plan financially. These 3 things have helped my husband and I. These 3 things have changed people's lives. When they say, Mrs. Hunt, I don't know what to do. And I say, don't worry about the investment. Don't worry about the other retirement stuff. You'll get to it. For now, just focus on these 3 things. The title of the seminar was Unbroke. If you want to never be broke, practice these 3 things. And I'm going to share with you some principles on these 3 things. Saving money. Earlier on, I gave us statistics showing that people are not saving. I have another slide that shows that in America, and they compared America to other countries. In other countries, and those of you that are parents who have come from other countries, they know that people over there will save. If they don't have the money, they don't buy it. But in America, they did this survey, and they found out in America, not only are people not saving, but they're living beyond their means. They go in the negative because they're trying to get everything quickly. So, saving money. What was number one that you're never going to forget? Save money. I have, in one of my classes, I have a set of keys. And I always say these are the 3 keys for you to be financially free. For you to have financial peace, these are the 3 things you need to do. And the first one is save money. You've got to learn to save money. The Bible has a verse that tells us that. Proverbs 21, verse 20. You guys can read this with me. In the house of the wise are stores of choice food, oil, but a what? I want you all to read that part, the last part. A foolish man devours all he has. That reminds me that even when it comes to my finances, I do not have to devour all that I have. I need to be saving something. Here's another one. Ants. Those of us that have watched ants, when they have food, what do they normally do? Can anyone tell me what ants normally do when they have food? They store it, right? They eat some, and then you'll see them carry some, and they're going to put it somewhere. You know why they're doing that? Because later on, they're not going to have food, and they're going to go back to where they had stored it. It says here, the Bible tells us in Proverbs 6, verse 6 to 8, go to the ant, consider her ways, and be wise. Without having any chief officer or ruler, she prepares her bread in the summer and gathers her food in harvest. That is clearly telling you that when there's plenty, they take some and they put it aside for a rainy day. So why do you have to save? I work or I have money. Why do I have to save? Here's some reasons. House. Sometimes later on you're planning that one day you're going to have to buy a house. Or you're renting right now and you want to buy a house, so you want to save towards purchasing a home. What about medical bills? Some of you might be too young to understand that, hey, there's medical bills, and let me tell you, a lot of people suffer financially because of medical bills. And so you want to save so that you have something to be able to cover those medical bills when it happens. Yes, if you're thinking of later on in life and you want to have a pension, college. You know, a lot of us want to go to college, and sometimes our parents can't afford it. Or some parents prepare for it, and they're able to help their child through college. But what if I'm not able to save for college? My advice to you is save whatever you can. And one of the questions I normally have from groups that I've taught is, how much should I save? And I say, I am not going to give you the amount because it depends on your situation. What I want to know is that if you have $100, you are putting something away. If you have $50, you're putting something away. The principle is you have to save something, okay? Some expenses that come up, and we'll talk about those in a little while. Vacation, if you're planning one, you know, you want to be able to save so you can do these things. Emergency fund. Anyone know what that is? Okay, he says $1,000 because I know where he's been hearing that. But emergency fund, it might be, it's recommended that you should have a minimum of $1,000 for emergencies. Now, some of you that are in high school are probably saying, well, Mrs. Hunt, I really don't ever have emergencies. Yes, you do. What happens when things happen in high school and you want to participate in those things and you don't have any money? Right? But if you yourself have got a little job and you're putting away some money, and let's say, for example, your parents eventually get you a car and you want to be able to drive around, and your parents say, okay, here's the car, I've put insurance on it and you're driving, but now you've got to take care of gas. What happens when the car breaks down? Those are all emergency things. Things like a car breaking down is a major expense. And so you want to be able to have something set aside. One of the most important reasons to save systematically is for an emergency. I can tell you right now, if I was speaking to a congregation of adults, someone is going through that emergency right now, or they're coming to have one with emergency. Cars break down, appliances at a home break down, somebody loses a job, something happens that you never planned for. And if you don't have an emergency fund, if you don't have something set aside, guess what happens? You go into crisis mode. Because now I have a broken car, what do? Oh, I've got to get a loan, or I've got to charge it to a card. So it just doesn't really help you in that situation. It says it's unavoidable fact that you're going to have an emergency no matter what happens. It's going to happen at some point. Here's some of the reasons for emergency funds. I mentioned earlier on, loss of employment, medical emergency, car breakdown. What's your emergency? Can somebody tell me something that has happened that was an emergency? Anyone? Yes, sir. Yes, water heater exploded. That's not cheap. I know for a fact that happened to our house. The hot water heater itself was like $1,200 before the guy who came to put it together. And that was not a luxury thing. We had to have it repaired, right? The washing machine or the dryer or something happens to that. You definitely need to have an emergency. So going back to the question that I asked earlier on, how much should you have? The recommended amount for somebody who is starting out with no emergency fund at all, or in your household, aim for $1,000. And I'm going to give you some tips as to how you can get that. If your household income is less than $25,000, aim for $500. If it's less than that, aim for something. At least say, hey, in my household, okay, I know I don't have anything right now, but we're going to save $25 a week, whatever. And you guys, those of you that have jobs and are working, you work way too hard not to be able to put something aside for emergencies. Here's what's normal in America. 69% of Americans would struggle to cover a $1,000 emergency. And most of those things that I mentioned will cost $1,000 or more sometimes, okay? So if something happened in some households, they wouldn't be able to cover that $1,000 expense. So when you're starting your emergency fund, now I'm going to be honest here with you. What's an emergency for me might not be an emergency for my husband. So what we do if you're married is have the conversation so you can discuss what things will we consider to be emergencies. For example, my friend decides her daughter's going to get married, and I go into a panic mode. Oh, she's getting married in 3 months' time, and I don't have a dress. That's an emergency for me. And my husband looks at me and he says, no. And guess what he does? He pulls out the sheet that we have. There's a list of what we consider as emergencies, and he said, is buying a new wedding dress an emergency? No. Okay. Then we have to change the scenario there. Okay? So if you are married, my advice to you is make a list of what's an emergency so you both agree on what an emergency is. If you're single, if you're young, say these are the 3 things that if I'm putting this money aside, I will only use this money for these things. And then that way you've got yourself some parameters to guide you. Here's starting an emergency fund. Sell something or sell some things. Some of us have a lot of stuff. Young people, you probably, I'll give you an example. My daughter, I have 2 daughters and a son, 2 of them are in college. And she was complaining of how she needed this, she needed that. And I said, hey, there's a resale store down the street. The things that don't fit you, go and sell over there. And she was surprised by taking those, the bag of clothes that she had outgrown. She went to the resale store and they would give her $2 and $3. And before you know, she had $38 from items that she had in the house. And I said, now you can take that money and you could use it to purchase something else. So if you need to start your emergency fund, sell something. When you sell that item, you say, I'm taking this $10 or this $50 and I am going to put it towards my emergency fund. If you're working and you want to start an emergency fund, get a second job, okay? But you're getting that second job just temporarily, just to get your emergency fund started. I'm not saying you've got to continue working. Or those of you that are in college and you want to get your emergency fund started, get that second job while you're on campus and put aside something because something will happen during the time you're there. Work from home. Some people have a gift of being able to do things from home. I had a lady who was talented and she would make all these wonderful wreaths and bouquets and stuff like that. Hey, if you can do something from home without the added expense, if you can tutor or do something outside the normal job, you can get yourself some money starting for your emergency fund. Cut your grocery bill in half. You're probably saying, well, how do you do that when you have a family? Take advantage of buy one, get one free. If the grocery store has a sale and spaghetti or toothpaste or whatever it is buy one, get one free, take advantage of that. It's not going to cost you too much to do that. Take the extra money that you'd have had to buy on your groceries and put that towards your emergency fund. Stop eating out. Let me repeat that. I said, stop eating out. If you sit down and calculate the amount of money that is spent eating out, you will be amazed. I can see some guilty faces, and I'm going to turn my face so no one knows who I'm looking at. I see smiles and everything. Think about it, okay? I heard somebody say, stop eating out. Okay, let me give you an example. I get up in the morning. I don't have breakfast at home. I've got to get to work. I've got to get to school. I've got to get to college, whatever it is. I've got to stop and get something to eat. Okay, it's only $5, $6. I go to work or college or whatever I do. It's lunchtime. I'm starving. I have to get lunch. I go and I get lunch, $10, $12. I've spent $5 or $6 at breakfast. I've spent another $10 at lunchtime. In the evening, I am so tired. I've had such a busy day. I need to buy myself something to eat on my way home from work. I buy it. I spend another $10, $15. How much have I spent for the day? $25, $30 on one day. Imagine if I just adjusted something and I had breakfast at home, so I wouldn't have to buy Starbucks or whatever it is that you're going to buy. What if I decided, hey, maybe 2-3 times a week, I'm going to make sure that I pack my lunch to work? A lot of offices now allow you to do that. You're able to have microwaves and they have kitchens. And take the money that you would have been eating out and put it into that emergency fund. Is that a good tip? Yes, yes, definitely. Somebody said, I agree. Okay, skip this year's vacations. If you know you have nothing at all saved up for an emergency, you have no right to be going on vacation. If I was you, I would say the money that I would spend on vacation, I'm going to start my emergency fund, and 6 months down the line, I'm going to go on my vacation. And then you can do that. Go on a spending freeze. Okay, I like this one. I agree that me and my husband are not going to spend on anything other than our living expenses. If you're single or if you're young, tell your friend, remind me that I'm on a spending freeze so that you and I don't go to the yogurt place or whatever it is that young people want to do, or Starbucks. It's amazing how much people spend on Starbucks. Now, you know, I know I'm in an Adventist church because Starbucks sells other things other than coffee, okay? But the young people have all kinds of drinks, and they have chai teas, and they now do orange juice and muffins and all that. It's amazing what it costs. So if you have a friend who likes those kind of things, tell them, you know what, I'm on a spending freeze. I'm not doing any of that, and ask them to hold you accountable to some of this stuff. All right. Debt. Let me go back to the savings one. I don't have a slide for it, but I want to share this with you. Here's a tip. If you're trying to save money and you find you have money and you put it into your savings account that is connected to your checking account, here's what normally happens. I get paid today. I put the money in my savings account. 3 days later, my checking account doesn't have very much. What do? I just transfer it right back because it's all online. It's all electronic. One of the tips that have helped my husband and I is we made our savings account at a different branch to our normal checking account. And we refuse to have a debit card access to that account. We refuse to be able to just get the money as and when. We have to drive to that bank to get that cash out. That was a way of taking our savings account and keeping it separate from our checking account. Okay, did you guys get that? Have your savings account separate from your checking account, and preferably at another location or another bank. And another tip, have it automatically sent to your savings account. We all have good intentions. We all intend that I'm going to transfer the money out, or I'm going to write the check to my savings account. It doesn't happen. If you work for a company that allows you to send your money to more than one bank account, say, I'm going to allocate $50, whatever the amount is, and I'm going to put it into that savings account. If you're a teenager and your parents give you some sort of commission when you do work or whatever, and you're old enough, and I'll tell you that as a teenager, when you're 14, you're old enough to have a bank account. And you can have a savings account too. So you can put something in there. Okay, debt. This is a huge, huge problem in America. This is a huge, huge problem for both the young and the old. And the Bible has a verse for it. It says, the rich, read this with me, the rich rule over the poor, and the what? The borrower is slave to the lender. Proverbs 22, verse 7. The borrower is slave to the lender. And you're saying, well, how does that tie in with debt? Think about it. If it's Visa card, American Express, MasterCard, whoever it is that you have debts with, they're the ones that tell you how much to pay, when to pay, what happens if you don't pay. And so it is important that you understand that surely you become a slave to that lender. They start dictating your life. And they even tell you, if you don't pay by this date, here's what's going to happen to you. That's definitely a slave relationship. So what if I've messed up, Mrs. Hunt, and I have debt? Is there anything I can do? What if I don't have debt and I know friends or family members who have debt and they want some help? What sort of help can we give those individuals? Here's what, I've got another slide for that. I'll get to that. More than $800 billion is owed on credit cards. This is debt. So do we have a plan for getting out of debt if you do have debt? Yes, we do. Pray about your personal finances. The Lord is able to deliver us from everything and anything. Even as a young person, if you don't know how to manage money and you want guidance, say, God, please help me in this area. I'm new to this. I need help. I need guidance. Help me to do the things that I need to do. Get a part-time job or do overtime if you have any debt. And take the money that you get from your overtime work or from the part-time job and apply it to debt. It's not more money for you to spend. A lot of times what people do is they get a second job or they get a part-time job, they take that money and now I buy a bigger car or a bigger house or whatever it is. That's not the plan. You want to get a job, a part-time job, or do overtime specifically either to put money in your savings account or to be able to apply to your debt. Make a list of everything you own or owe. When I was running a class several years ago, there was a young lady who had just finished college, and she came through my class, and the first 2 lessons we were doing great. The third lesson, she came back and she said, Mrs. Hunt, I don't like you. And I was like, what did I do? And she said, you made me go home and make a list of what I owned and a list of what I owe. And she said, I had student loans, I had credit card debt, and I never knew what the balances were. She said, I would just pay the minimum payments of whatever they asked for. But this exercise made her sit down and say, make a list. How can you start paying off your debt if you have no idea where to start? So you make the list. You make the list of those debts. I mentioned something about selling things you don't need. Some of us have things that are sitting in boxes, in storage units that we really don't need. Sell those things and get the money. Stop borrowing and spending more money. Some people think the more I spend, but I'll just borrow some more because I'll be able to, be able to pay it back. You want to stop borrowing. Do not borrow in order to pay debt off. You want to get into a plan of paying off your debt. And then utilize the debt snowball. I know somebody who obviously is a Dave Ramsey fan knows what the debt snowball is. Does anybody other than that individual know what a debt snowball is? No? Somebody said interest? No. A debt snowball, I'm going to explain that to you. This is the most effective way to pay off your debt. And the reason why it's effective is because you do one step at a time. And when you do that, let me put it on the slide there. Here's how it works. You list your debts, the smallest to the largest, regardless of what? Interest rate. And the reason why you do that is because sometimes your balances and the interest rate are not really workable for you. Your biggest debt might be the lowest interest rate, but it's going to take you a very long time to pay it off. So the reason why we do the smallest to the largest is because it allows you to do something and feel like you've achieved something. If I've got a $100 credit card balance and I paid over 2 months, I say, yes, I'm done. I'm going on to my next debt. And so it gives you some momentum, it gives you some excitement to be able to go to the next one. Then you pay the smallest debt first, okay? All the others, you're still paying the minimum payments, but the one that's the smallest one is the one that I'm going to put the most money to. So for example, if I have a Visa card that had a $100 balance on it, and I paid $50 this month, next month I only have $50, and I clear that one, I'm going to take that $50 that I was paying on my Visa card by the third month, and I'm going to add that to the next debt. So your debt keeps, your payments keep increasing, and your snowball keeps growing. It says you take the payment from the smallest debt, and you add it to the next debt payment, and then you continue this principle. Let me tell you, this principle has worked for so many of my clients. Several years ago, I did a class, and I had a young couple, husband and wife, they'd been married maybe a year and a half, and they came to me and said, Mrs. Hunt, I'm so embarrassed. We have $60,000 worth of debt. And I said, is that just student loans? Is that what? And they said, no, we have student loans as well as credit card debt. And so one of the sad things about this situation was one of them did not finish school. So they've got student loans, but they did not finish school. So now they decided, well, we've got to do something different. And I introduced them to the debt snowball. Do you know they got so excited about paying off those little debts? In 3 years, they called me back, and they came and said, can we meet you for lunch? I said, sure. They came, and they gave me a hug, and I was like, okay, you're going to tell me you guys are having a baby or something? She said, no. She said, for the past 3 years, we had been doing this. And she said, do you know we paid off our debts, and we've been able to save for a down payment on our home in 3 years? Because they got very, very passionate about it. They started, and here's what was crazy about their situation was their friends around them were teasing them and saying, you've been married for 3 years and you're still driving that old car? You've been married for 3 years and you still don't have a house? And they said, we have a plan. We have a plan. In 3 years, they had paid off their debt. They had got a down payment for their home. When they went and bought their first home, they paid some money because their friends still had the debt. Their friends might have had a house, but they were still making large payments. So my advice to you, if you are in a position where you do have debt, try this. If it doesn't work, one of the things that I do with some of my clients is I tell them at the beginning of my session, if I share this stuff with you and you do it and it doesn't work, I will refund all the fees you've given me. I've never had to refund anybody the money because these things really do work. Here's the type of debt that I think we all should have. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to what? Love one another. That's the kind of debt we should have. Love one for another. Well, here's the opportunity for us to talk about the dreaded B word. Who knows what that is? The dreaded B word? Bankruptcy? Nope. Broke? Nope. Bills? No. Budget. The dreaded B word is the budget. Nobody wants to live on a budget. You guys, I am sure, I missed that. Why do you have to live on a budget? Well, here's what exactly is a budget? The budget is not something that's bad for you. John Maxwell says, a budget is simply what? Telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. Your parents will be able to identify with this, or you that are adults. At the end of the year, when you do your income tax returns, and you look at your household income, you say, what? We got that much money? What happened to it? But if you're living on a budget, you know, yes, we might have earned $70,000, but I know $50,000 was for the mortgage or whatever. So you kind of feel better about it. It's still a lot, but you feel better. Most people don't like budgets because of these reasons. Budgets have been used to control them. There's no money in the budget. There's no money in the budget, so you feel like, well, I don't like this budget thing. You know, it's controlling. It's too controlling. They are fearful about what they'll find. They don't want to do the budget because if I sit down and I do a budget, it's going to tell me that I can't eat out anymore. Or I'm going to sit down and do this budget and it's going to tell me that my car payment is way too high. Okay, the budget is there to help you. Here's another one. Never seen a budget that really worked. Oh, this budgeting thing doesn't work. I don't budget because it doesn't work. The budget is not the tool that's the problem. It could be you not sticking to your budget. It seems too restrictive and unnecessary. Here's, when I saw the statistics, it was alarming. It said 40% of families overspend every month. Do you know why they overspend every month? They don't have a budget. They don't know what's coming in and how much they have to plan for the month. So they just overspend and, it becomes a problem. So here's some of the benefits of a budget. You say, well, do I really have to do a budget? Remember the 3 things that I said you are not to forget at the end of this seminar? One of them was what? Save. You have got to save something. Another one was debt. Avoid debt at all costs. And then the third one was planning, which is the budgeting process. A budget can remove money fights from those close relationships. Those of us that are married, if you have a budget and we both agreed on that budget, it's easier for us to live at peace because I won't have to bring bags of shopping and hide them from my husband because, if it's in the budget, I'll bring those in. I'll give you a real life experience. And I shared this with the adults when I was here the last time. My husband's a musician. And so we have guitars and all kinds of stuff. And one time he came home and he had this big box. And I thought, oh man, if he's got a big box, he's spent probably big bucks, right? And he came in and I was like, what's in there? That box is huge. He says, an amplifier. And I said, oh, okay. And how did you pay for that? Because I know it wasn't in the budget. And he said, well, we give ourselves some, I guess it's like free money that you do whatever you want with it. It's not a lot of money. It might be $50 for the month, whatever. He had been saving his money, and he went to Guitar Center, and they had a sale. And that amplifier that would normally be $200 was $99. And so he had purchased it. But it did not affect our budget because he had the money. Okay, so it's important that you have those conversations with the relationships with your spouses. A written plan will take away the guilt, shame, and fear in many marriages if you put it down on paper. A written plan can show if you're overspending in certain areas. The reason, and those of us that might not be married or don't really have income yet, even when you're in high school and you get some money, make a plan with it. Say, hey, when I get my $50 on my little part-time job, here's what I'm going to do with it. And believe me, if you do that, you will be able to do all those things on paper. But if you don't, you're going to be wondering, what happened to that $100 that I had for my birthday? I don't know what happened to it. But at least even with that kind of stuff, you want to be able to budget it and plan for it. Have a budget that will ensure that you save regularly. Don't forget to include the savings in your budget if that's part of your plan. Okay, so you've got to be able to have that in your budget. It says here, a written monthly cash flow plan removes the management by crisis from your finances. That simply means if you've made a list at the beginning of the month of what your income is and what your expenses are, it means you're not going to be panicking through the month. You can say, well, I know I've got this bill, I've got this bill, I've got that to pay, and then you should be fine for the rest of the month. Be diligent. Okay, here's a biblical principle. In Bible times when Abraham and Lot and them were around, how did they determine how wealthy they were? What was it based on? The property most time was the animals, the sheep, the goats, the cows, or whatever it is they had. And so the Bible tells us in Proverbs 27, verse 3, be diligent to know the state of your flocks and attend to your herds. That is simply saying, know what it is that you have. Sit down and say, I have $50, here's what I'm going to do with my $50. I have $500, here's what I'm going to do with that. Be diligent. It means sit down and make a list of the things that you know you're going to have to spend on. Manage your bank accounts carefully. Young people, when you are old enough to have a bank account, and I know in the past, it's not like that anymore. When you had a debit card, if you did not have money in your bank account and you swiped that debit card, guess what used to happen? Anyone ever experienced, oh, maybe it's only other people that have experienced. What happens if you don't have money in your bank account and you run your debit card? Okay, he made a point, he said it goes negative. It never used to be like that. Before, it used to say declined. If you didn't have the money, it never went through. But nowadays, guess what happens with the bank? They let it go through, and they do what?
Charge you interest.
That's right. Yeah, that's how they get you. And with some of these banks, here's what they do. Not only do they let the one transaction go through, they let multiple transactions go through, and they charge you a fee for every transaction. So let's say if my bank charges $30, and I swipe my card and it goes through, and I swipe my card for pizza and it's $5, and I swipe my card. 3 times I've swiped my card at $30. Guess how much the bank is going to make from me? They're going to pay $90. They're going to charge me $90 for maybe my $5 pizza. Because they allowed you to go. Was that pizza worth it? No. It says keep track of your income, your spending habits. You want to be able to know, do I have the money in my account? And nowadays, you can get your bank app. You can check immediately before you even swipe that card whether you have the money or not. Remember, digital banking systems have glitches and delays, and they're not perfect. Let me give you an example. Somebody wrote a check, and this recently happened at our school. I was talking to someone earlier on. I'm a business manager at North Dallas Adventist Academy, and somebody wrote a check for one of the class fundraisers. They were buying popcorn. It was Christmas time. They wrote a check for $24. The check was not deposited into the school bank account for 2 months. Eventually, the class president came and said, "Oh, Mrs. Hunt, somebody bought popcorn from our class, and she gave me this $24 check." We put the check in the bank, and guess what? 2 days later, the bank called me and said that check was declined. They gave me the reason was that the account was closed. So I contacted the individual and found out that she had closed the bank account, but this check was still out there, and she didn't realize that the check had not been banked. So that $24 check cost her $35 in fees. And for us, because we have a policy at the school that if a check bounces with any parent, we've got to charge them a fee because the bank is going to also charge us a fee. So that $24 check ended up costing her almost $50. And that's because she had forgotten that that check was out there. She obviously was not checking her bank balances. She was not seeing that check. You've got to reconcile and make sure you know when those checks are out there, or else it's going to affect your finances. This was an alarming amount. Automatic overdraft loans netted the bank more than $29.5 billion just from them allowing you to get overdrawn. That's crazy. Here's another one. Banks made over $33 billion from overdraft revenue in 2016. It's going up and up because they're allowing you to be able to use money that's not there because they're going to make money from you. So my advice to you is always know what your bank balance is before you write that check. Okay? You want to make sure that there's enough funds in there to be able to clear that check. A budget can change your life if you don't leave things out. It's no use doing a budget if you say, well, I'm not going to put my vacation on this budget, but you're planning to go on vacation. Or, oh, I'm not going to do a budget because, I never do those things, and you eat out all the time, but you don't put it in your budget. You want to make sure you include everything. Keep it simple. Some people have budgets that are 3 pages long because they're overcomplicated. I had a client, a husband and wife situation, and the wife told me, she said, "Mrs. Hunt, every night before we go to bed, my husband is looking at this screen, this spreadsheet that's in different colors." And I said to him, "What is it?" He says, "It's our family budget." I said, "Why does it have to be so complicated?" All she wanted to see was, here's how much money I have coming in, and here's what I do with that money. Here's what our plan is. So keep it simple. You actually can complete one. Doing a budget is not difficult. Some people think it's difficult because it's got to be complicated. It is not complicated at all. And you live on that budget. It's no use doing a budget and then you don't live by the number. So if I say I'm going to spend $25 eating out per week, and I don't even keep track of that, how am I going to know when I get to the $25? So if you put a certain amount in your budget to track and say, I'm going to spend this amount on groceries, and so I know that I've spent $50, I've got another $50 to go, okay? So you want to be able to keep track of your budget. And then you've got to review. Things change from month to month. Some people say, I did my budget last year in February. It's the same this year. No, it's not. Some of those numbers change. Money and relationships. Here's an interesting one. Do you think finances have an impact on our relationships? Yes. Whether you're married, whether you're single, whether you're dating, even if you're not dating, trust me, you have those times when you say, well, can I even afford to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend? Because she's expensive. She only wants to eat at Chipotle's. I don't know. You know. So you want to be able to know about the finances and stuff like that. Conflict over money is still the leading cause of divorce today. That's not a made-up statistic. They've done and they've found out that even if there were other reasons involved, finances played a big part in those issues. Fighting about money is hazardous to your relationship. They did a study in the State of University. They found that the more couples quarreled about money, the more likely it was that they were going to get divorced. They did a statistic on that. They did some survey. A lot of people don't want to dive into money issues because they think it will create conflict. But a lack of open, positive conversations causes the conflict. And I have a slide there for those of you that are, not married. It says financial disagreements are strong predictors of divorce relative to the common marital disagreements. Yes, my husband and I might not agree on the color of the car or the color of the carpet, but they have found out when it comes to money issues, it's a big, big problem in relationships. A family stress level, particularly the wife, increases with debt. If you're in a household and there's a mother, or in a household and there's a wife and a husband situation, if there's debt in that household, the stress, a lot of stress goes, especially on the women. They just begin to feel a little insecure about it. So what can be done to navigate the pressure surrounding finances? How do you have these conversations about finances? Approaches to young adults and dating couples. What happens? I see a young man who's having a conversation. While I'm having the conversations, I'm sure he's giving a lot of good advice. Okay, so what happens to young adults and dating couples? When should you have these conversations? Does somebody want to tell me about this? Anyone make a suggestion? At what point do you have these conversations? Or you never have these conversations? Do you guys want to have those conversations when you're dating or not? Let's do it, did you say? Yeah, okay. At what stage do you have those conversations? Yeah, at stage in your relationship. You meet somebody today and the first thing you say, so do you have any debt? Is she going to date you? No, right? Do you have any student loans? Say that again. You want to be able to have conversations at the right time, okay? So let's see what I have here. 3 money talks to better understand your love interests. This is interesting. The story talk. This is when you say, how were we raised? How was it in your household? Who did the finances? Was it your mother or your father? Did you guys ever talk about money in your household? It is amazing how things that we have in our childhood is the way we sometimes want to do things when we have our own homes. So it's nice to be able to talk to somebody and find out, yeah, what happens? Who used to pay the bills in your house? Was it your mom or your dad? Did you think you guys never had bills? And she said, well, my parents never ever spoke about money. Or sometimes they say, guess what? My parents used to argue all the time. I would hear them talking about it. So you want to have those conversations when you're in some sort of relationship. Discussion start. In my house, this is where you say, in my house growing up, money was it a stress factor? Was it something that you guys felt free to ask your parents about? Was it something that was discussed around the family table? Or was it the children never know how much mom and dad earn? Or the children never know how much how much debt mom and dad have? You want to have those conversations. The fear talk. I'm not going to say anything about money because if she finds out that I've got all this debt, she won't marry me. You want to be able to have those conversations. You want to talk about how it makes you feel and how it makes him feel. My greatest financial fear. Some people say, I lived in a household where we were poor, and my fear is to be poor again. Those are the conversations you have with somebody when you're in some sort of relationship with them. The grace talk. Now, sometimes you get into a relationship later on in life and you find out, hey, I messed up with money. When I was young and stupid, one time I was counseling a young couple, and the guy in the counseling session started crying. And he said, I was young and I was stupid, and I thought that I'd always have lots of money, and it brought so much stress to my wife, and here we are sitting here, and I want to ask her to forgive me because, I put her through a lot of stress. So you want to be able to give grace where grace is needed if somebody's messed up. Share a money mistake you've made. Does anyone have any suggestions of some money mistakes people make in life? Anyone? Spending too much on what? Spending too much on what you want. Is it a need or is it a want? Right? And anybody else? Any other mistakes that people have made? That you know, even if you yourself haven't experienced it, that you've heard of. Any other mistakes that people have made? What about when they've bought things that they regret later on? I thought I could afford this car. Suddenly I can't afford it because, I thought I could afford this, whatever it is, but it's a gas guzzler. People make mistakes. Anything else? Do you have another suggestion? You're trying to think. Anyone else that can think of mistakes that people make with money when it comes to where, hey, they feel so bad about it? Credit cards. Yeah. My credit limit was only $500, and I thought I could pay it all off. But guess what? Every time I used it, they increased my credit limit, and now I've got $5,000 worth of debt. So it's important for you to be able to talk about some of those debts, but the worst thing you could do is hide them from your future partner. You do not want to do that. So when you get to the advanced stage in your relationship, this is when you start talking about, hey, we're going to get married, this is what we're going to do. You definitely want to share things like, I have credit card debt, I have student loans. Do not surprise your spouse getting married, and then when you're on honeymoon, you say, guess what, honey? I have $50,000 worth of student loans. Let me tell you the experience that I had. About 8 years ago, Dave Ramsey's organization called me and said, hey, Mrs. Hunt, would you do a financial counseling session for a couple that we're going to have in a reality show? I was like, oh, yeah, sure, yeah. Give me some background. They said, okay, we were in Arlington at the time. I was in Dallas, and this couple lived in Arlington. They brought the cameras, and they were going to record this wonderful couple and their situation with their finances. So we got dressed up. We were ready to do this financial counseling session. And so they went to the husband, and this has all been recorded on a reality show a movie they were making. They went to the husband, and they said to him, so how much debt do you have in your household, young man? And he said, well, my wife and I both work. We have one child, probably $5,000. They went to the wife, and they said, so how much debt do you have in the household? And there was silence. And you thought, well, she should know this. We only have like $5,000. And she confessed in front of cameras that they had $45,000 worth of debt. How would you feel if you found that out after you were in a relationship with somebody, after you married that individual? Anyone, how would you feel? Anyone want to share with me how they'd feel? Would you trust that person? You've just started your relationship in the wrong way. You want to be able to find out that information early. You want to talk about it so that you agree and you know before you say, I do, that this is where this person is, okay? And that we're going to work it out together. You've got to agree on that. Well, let me tell you the end of that story. I counseled that couple for a few months. In our counseling sessions, I discovered that it was more than just a money problem. Here's what they had done. They had lived together as husband and wife. She paid 50% of the mortgage, and he paid 50% of the mortgage. He kept his bank account separate, and she kept her bank account separate. The two were never put together as one household. And so what would happen is he would do whatever he was doing with his money, and she would do whatever she was doing with her money. And they had one child. So dad would take care of the tuition because the child went to a private school, and mom would take care of clothing and food. That's why they had no idea how much debt they had. They were husband and wife in the same household. My advice to you is you have to have those conversations. You have to know those things before. It says, financial secrets will undermine your marriage and set couples up for failure. It is not a good way to start a relationship, especially if you're going to be married to this person, not to know that information. Because if they find out later on, it's going to be harder to have to deal with it. Many divorcees felt surprised. Divorcees felt surprised when they learned their partner's financial habits after they got married. If I don't know that you're a spender and I find that out when I'm married and I have to deal with that, that's a shocker. At least if I'm in a relationship and I know, you know what, she kind of likes to spend, so we're going to have to, navigate through that, and we agree and I'm aware of it, it's easier to actually manage that. So here's some, talk about your life goals. If you're planning to marry somebody, talk about your goals. I want to travel the world. I want to go to China, or I want to do this. I want to talk about those things so that you can get a feel of how the other person feels about those things. And even things like how many children you're going to have. Do you know kids cost money? They do. So if I'm going to have 6 kids and he hates kids, is that going to help us in our relationship? No. Okay, you definitely want to... would you like to buy a home, or do you want to rent forever? Those are conversations you're having in your relationship, and that helps you, see what sort of person they are. When would you like to buy a house? Do you want to get married today and tomorrow we have buying a house? Or would you prefer to wait until we have the money? And you have those conversations so that you can kind of have a feel of what they think. Do you want a further education? If somebody didn't finish their degree and they want to go back, you find you don't want to be married to somebody who, when you're married, they say, well, now I want to go to college, and they surprise and say, well, I didn't know you want to be able to plan accordingly by having these serious conversations. Are you interested in traveling? And if the person is interested in traveling, you've got to know, hey, this is going to cost money. What are we going to do about these things? Would you like to have children? And how many? I mentioned that one, so we'll move that one here. Leah, I know you wanted to have a 5-minute break. Do you guys want to have a 5-minute break and then come back? Then we can continue. I'm not going to keep you for too long. I want to give you time to ask questions. So please write those questions down. Don't be afraid. Don't put your name, because we'll collect the ones you have, and then we're going to have some questions and answers, and then we've got a few more slides that we need to go. I'm going to give you a 5-minute break, okay? Stretch your legs, go and get a drink of water, shake up and wake up a little, and then come right back, and then we'll continue. Thank you.